Right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a closer look at the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Now, most of us know it as the body's central stress response system, right? But we're going to explore its much deeper and you could argue more fundamental role as a master biological timekeeper.
So let's start with a provocative idea. We tend to picture the HPA axis as a purely reactive system, an emergency alarm that just blares when we face a threat. But what if that's only half the story? What if its main, day-to-day job isn't reactive at all, but actually proactive, a predictive system designed to anticipate the body's needs over a full 24-hour cycle?
Before we get into that fascinating timekeeping role, we need to make sure we're all on the same page. So let's have a quick recap of the classic HPA axis feedback loop, the fundamental mechanism that we all learned about. Okay, so the whole cascade kicks off in the hypothalamus, which releases corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH. This hormone then travels down to the anterior pituitary gland, telling it to secrete adrenal corticotropic hormone, or ACTH. From there, ACTH enters the bloodstream, makes its way to the adrenal gland sitting on top of the kidneys, and boom, triggers the release of glucocorticoids, with the main player being cortisol. It's this beautiful, hierarchical structure that allows for both amplification and really precise control. Now, in the face of an acute stressor, the purpose of all this is crystal clear. Cortisol's main job is to mobilize energy. It fires up glucose production in the liver while telling other tissues to ease off on using it. The result? A surge in blood glucose, ready to fuel the brain and muscles for whatever fight-or-flight situation is at hand, whether that's running from a predator or, cramming for an exam.
But crucially, this system has a brilliant off switch built in. It's not designed to stay on forever. High levels of cortisol circulating in the blood are detected by receptors in both the hypothalamus and the pituitary. This signal effectively acts as a brake, shutting down the release of both CRH and ACTH. It's a classic negative feedback loop, and it's absolutely vital for bringing the body back to a state of balance and preventing the damage that comes from being chronically stressed out.
And this is where our perspective really needs to shift. Because beyond this reactive feedback loop, the HPA axis is profoundly governed by an intrinsic, proactive rhythm. This isn't about responding to things that happen to us. It's about synchronizing our entire physiology with the 24-hour rotation of the planet. Let's dig into how this rhythm is set. As you can see here, cortisol secretion isn't just random or purely driven by stress. It follows this very predictable daily or diurnal rhythm. In a healthy person, cortisol levels start to climb in the very early hours of the morning, leading to what's known as the cortisol awakening response, which peaks about 30 to 60 minutes after you wake up. Then, the levels steadily fall throughout the day, hitting their absolute lowest point, the nadir, in the middle of the night. And this rhythm isn't arbitrary at all. It serves some really critical physiological functions. That morning peak, that's getting your body ready for action by mobilizing glucose. The deep trough at night, that's essential for allowing you to fall asleep and stay asleep. The rhythm even fine-tunes your immune system across the 24-hour cycle. Essentially, this predictive cycle allows your body to anticipate the demands of the day and the restorative needs of the night, long before they happen.
Now, to really get this, we need to understand two different timescales. The big 24-hour cycle we've been talking about is the circadian rhythm. Think of it as the master clock. But layered on top of that is an ultradian rhythm, a much faster cycle. Cortisol is actually released in pulses, roughly every hour or so. This pulsatility gives the system this incredible moment-to-moment flexibility to respond to immediate needs, all within that larger circadian framework.
So the system is timed, that much is clear. But how does it actually know what time it is? What's the molecular machinery inside that's driving these incredibly precise rhythms?
Well, the conductor of this whole physiological orchestra is a tiny little region in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. This is the body's master clock. It gets direct input from your eyes, from the retina, which allows it to sync up its own internal rhythm with the daily cycle of light and dark. The SCN then sends out timing signals to coordinate all the little peripheral clocks located in every single tissue and organ, including the glands of the HPA axis itself.
At the very heart of these clocks is a beautiful molecular engine. It's a feedback loop driven by a pair of proteins called clock and BMAL1. These two join together and switch on other clock genes, like period and cryptochrome. As the proteins from these genes build up, they travel back and switch off clock and BMAL1, which in turn shuts down their own production. It's this elegant, self-regulating loop that takes roughly 24 hours to complete, and it directly controls the genes for CRH and ACTH, imposing that robust circadian rhythm on the entire system. So we've established how this intricate rhythmic system is supposed to work. But what happens when that precise timing breaks down? What are the consequences when the whole rhythm gets thrown out of whack? Unfortunately, modern life is practically designed to throw a spanner in the works of our ancient internal clocks. Things like chronic stress, doing shift work, frequent jet lag, or having a sleep disorder can all wreck the HPA rhythm. They create this profound mismatch between our internal biological time and the cues from the outside world, effectively uncoupling our bodies from the most powerful timing cue we have, the light-dark cycle. One of the most common patterns we see is a flattened rhythm. A healthy rhythm has a really high amplitude, a huge difference between that morning peak and the nightly trough. In a flattened rhythm, that wave is barely a ripple. The morning peak isn't as high as it should be, and the nightly levels don't drop low enough. This pattern is often seen in conditions like adrenal insufficiency and chronic fatigue syndrome. And the health consequences of this are systemic. Without that robust morning surge of cortisol, people often feel utterly exhausted and low on energy. Their ability to handle new stressors is really impaired. Metabolically, it can cause problems with glucose regulation, and it's also linked to a weakened immune response, making them more vulnerable to infections. Another critical form of dysregulation is a shifted rhythm, what we call a phase shift. The most worrying example of this is when cortisol levels stay high at night. Instead of hitting that deep trough that allows for rest and repair, cortisol remains pathologically elevated right when the body should be sleeping. It's like your body's trying to run a marathon while you're trying to sleep. And this pattern of high nighttime cortisol is a classic sign of several clinical conditions. It's a hallmark of Cushing's syndrome, for instance. But we also see it in chronic stress, severe sleep apnea, and it's very strongly correlated with depression and anxiety disorders. And of course, it's a direct result of the chaos that shift work and jet lag inflict on our internal clocks. Now, it's really important to grasp that these rhythm problems aren't just niche endocrine issues. Their impact is systemic, and they are a major contributing factor to the pathology of many of the chronic diseases that are so common today. This chart really gives you a sense of the scale of the problem. Dysregulation of the HPA axis rhythm is a massive contributor to metabolic disorders like obesity and type 2 diabetes, mood disorders like depression, widespread immune dysfunction, and, as we're about to see, cardiovascular disease. It really drives home the point that the timing of cortisol release is just as important as the amount. Let's just focus on the cardiovascular system for a moment. Glucocorticoids are absolutely essential for maintaining normal blood pressure and the tone of our blood vessels. But when the system is dysregulated, when cortisol levels are chronically high or just rhythmically chaotic, it contributes directly to hypertension. And over time, that constant high pressure increases the risk for a whole cascade of problems, from atherosclerosis to heart failure. So, to pull these key clinical points together, a flattened rhythm, like we see in adrenal insufficiency, leads to an impaired stress response and metabolic problems. On the other hand, a shifted rhythm with high cortisol at night, which you find in things like Cushing's syndrome and depression, directly contributes to insulin resistance, high blood pressure, and of course, terrible sleep disruption. And if there's one idea that really nails our central theme today, it's this quote. Cortisol isn't just a stress hormone. Think of it as the critical messenger that carries the time signal from the master clock in the brain, the SCN, out to every other tissue in the body. It's how your liver, your muscles, and your immune cells know what time it is, allowing your entire body to operate in this beautiful, coordinated synchrony. Which leaves us with a final and pretty crucial question. The HPA axis and its rhythms evolved over millennia, hardwired for a world that was governed by the simple, powerful cycle of day and night. But in our modern 24/7 world, a world that increasingly ignores these fundamental cycles, how can we better protect the ancient, vital rhythms that are so foundational to our health? Thank you for listening.